When the phone is already in your hand, yet inside you still feel empty, it becomes especially clear where your energy is slipping away. And if you are still wasting yourself on people and places that offer no return, you are cutting your time into pieces. The problem is not that you have little energy. The problem is that it is going to places where you are not awaited, are not heard, and where there is no intention of reciprocation. You are trying to earn a place that has long ceased to be yours, and because of this, you fail to notice those people and those activities where everything already works without unnecessary pressure. It is important here not just to stop, but to see the difference between noise and genuine response. Some choices are loud, they promise a lot, demand even more, and return almost nothing. Others are almost imperceptible, but it is they who provide a sense of life, support, and quiet confidence that you are moving in the right direction. By the end of this video, it will be clear why the inner voice often sounds quieter than fear, why the most correct signals do not always appear convincing, and how to stop confusing pressure with direction. Then you will no longer be spreading yourself thin on everything and will start to discern where your energy truly works for you and where it is simply taken away without a trace. Nowadays, especially, many people live in a state of constant distraction. Too many messages, too many expectations, too many places where something is wanted from you, but almost nowhere does it provide a sense of meaning. As a result, this causes not just fatigue, but a quiet internal exhaustion, where the day has passed, there is almost no strength left, and nothing significant has happened. That is why the topic of choosing one's energy has become not abstract, but very practical. While attention is torn by other voices, it becomes increasingly difficult to hear what truly belongs to you. This is not only about work or relationships, it concerns habits, environment, and those decisions that seem right for others but leave you cold inside. At such a point, it's easy to confuse movement with progress, busyness with value, and approval with real support. Because of this, a person may invest for years in areas where there is no growth and not even notice how their own life is slipping away. During these minutes, the conversation will not be about beautiful promises, but about how to recognize where to direct yourself and what it's time to let go of. First, you will see why it is so easy to lose energy on fruitless attempts to fit in where you don't belong. Then you will figure out where to look for real sources of energy, and after that, everything will come down to a simple yet very honest way to check your decisions right now. By the end, it will become clearer how to distinguish internal agreement from self-deception and why the quietest response often turns out to be the most accurate. There is one more important point that is rarely spoken aloud. Energy is spent not only on actions, but also on internal disputes with oneself, on the attempts to appear more convenient, stronger, or righter than you actually are. And when this constant tense background does not turn off, even good opportunities begin to feel like a burden. Therefore, it's important here not just to seek motivation, but to learn to hear where a real yes arises and where you are simply being pulled by habit, fear, or someone else's expectations. It is this distinction that changes everything else. True energy almost never comes to places where you are merely tolerated. It appears in those places where there is a response, not just effort. But people often go in the opposite direction and think that if they add more effort, the dead zone will suddenly come to life. Hence the false belief, which is especially exhausting, that value needs to be squeezed out of every contact, every task, and every place until they start taking you seriously. In reality, this is not strength, but slow self-destruction. The body is very honest in such moments. First, the jaw tenses, then the gaze narrows, and then a strange heaviness appears in the chest, as if you are always a bit late. This is not just fatigue, it's a signal that energy is being spent on resistance. When you are not in your contour, any action becomes doubly costly. You are not only doing the task, but you are also constantly holding yourself within it, as if asking someone else's door not to close before you. This is where many make a typical mistake. They confuse loudness with life. It seems that if a situation is noisy, if there are many messages, many promises, a lot of tension, then there is a perspective. But noise easily masks emptiness. A true response is arranged differently. It can be quiet, almost imperceptible, without tumultuous enthusiasm, but afterward, your shoulders don't collapse, and you don't urgently want to hide. You don't become perfectly light, but you stop internally contracting. This is especially evident in simple examples. A person tries for months to fit into a company where their jokes are politely passed by, and after each meeting they are left with a dry mouth and a sense that they have played someone else's role. Then they enter a much smaller environment where no one gives loud compliments, but in the conversation there is no need to guess the tone, no need to constantly defend oneself, and suddenly a steady warmth appears in the chest. Nothing spectacular happened, but energy stopped leaking into constant tension. Another example is a job where you are praised only for your patience, even though inside your neck is already aching, and you sit in the car for another 5 minutes each evening just to avoid going back. And next to it may be a task that doesn't look prestigious, but your hands don't freeze in it, and your attention doesn't scatter into fragments. The turn here is that energy is born not from pressure, but from coincidence. Not everything that demands you is worth your effort. Not everything that promises growth truly gives growth. Sometimes what seems too quiet is precisely the only place where you do not betray yourself. Therefore, the most honest question is not how much you can endure the situation, but what happens to you after contacting it. If after the contact you become more collected, even-keeled, alive, this is your source. If after it, there remains internal noise and a desire to disappear, you already know the answer, even if your mind still argues. Belief in oneself does not arise from pretty phrases. It accumulates from the fact that you finally stop feeding what depletes you. When you remove the excess, space inside is freed for real possibilities, and this is felt almost physically. The shoulders cease to be stone-like, breathing becomes deeper, and the head is not so hollow. But before talking about courage, it is important to notice that you often underestimate one simple thing: your own response to reality. It is already there. It is just muffled by others' expectations and the habit of enduring. There are people who constantly seek signs in random coincidences, and people who believe only in rigid calculations. But between these extremes, there exists a much more accurate guide. When you go to where you truly fit, your body does not require constant persuasion. You do not need to prove to yourself every minute that you are on your path. It becomes quieter inside, not joyously demonstrative, not louder, but precisely quieter. And here lies a new mistake that many make after the first honest turn. They expect the right choice to immediately bring fireworks, lightness, and impeccable confidence. And if that does not happen, they begin to doubt and return to where it is familiar, even though it has long been empty. It is like a person who has stepped out of shoes that were too tight and is surprised that their feet still feel pain. He decides that the shoes were normal, since the discomfort did not disappear instantly. But the issue is not that the tight spot has suddenly become suitable. The issue is that the body still remembers the pressure. The same goes for decisions. Even a correct choice does not relieve old tension overnight, but it changes the quality of your internal state right now. You justify yourself less, catch yourself less often thinking that you need to earn the right to be where you are, and more often notice simple signs of agreement: normal sleep, a steadier tone of voice, the absence of this unpleasant tightening in your stomach before the start of the day. There is one more important thing that people usually remember too late. Opportunities rarely look like a perfect door with a sign. More often, it is a small feeling that does not shout, but simply does not evoke rejection. It can come in a conversation, in an offer, in an unexpected pause, in the desire to stay for 5 more minutes where previously you wanted to leave immediately. And if you are always waiting for something dazzling, you miss what already aligns with you. Then, the ability to believe in yourself ceases to be abstract. It becomes the result of new experience, where you no longer betray your own response for someone else's noise. Belief in oneself starts to form not from a big decision, but from one honest movement that can be made in 60 seconds. Take any situation where you have long been expending energy without return, and for 1 minute, stop feeding it mentally. Do not replay explanations. Do not justify someone else's coldness. Do not argue with the fact. Just notice what happens in your body when you no longer hold on to what does not hold you. Usually, at that moment, the stomach relaxes a bit, space appears in the shoulders, and the breath stops clinging to the upper chest. This micro contribution is already important because it returns to you the feeling that a choice is possible right now, not somewhere later. It works in such a way that the smallest shift breaks the habit of enduring inertia. You do not need to analyze your whole life today or make a fateful decision. One action is sufficient to show the nervous system a new reference. For example, if you have been dragging along a conversation, task, or contact that is long empty, do not continue the internal monologue indefinitely. Practically, this can look very simple. You notice that after another message, meeting, or task, your body tightens, and you do not add another attempt to guess, to please, or to earn. The mere act of stopping already changes the trajectory. How to integrate this into chaos? At work, in a crowded train, or in a queue, you can do it discreetly in 60 seconds. No one will see that you are turning your attention inward and checking where there is tension now and where there is response. You stand straight, feel the support under your feet, slightly relax your jaw, and note where in your body it has become tight next to this thought or this person. Then, mentally, let go of what demands too much from you without response. Outside, it looks like an ordinary pause, and inside it becomes more spacious. The unnecessary fuss disappears, your palms stop being cold, and a rare, very specific feeling arises. You no longer need to prove to yourself the right not to go where it is empty. The most useful thing here is not in a heroic turn, but in the fact that you begin to discern where the energy returns and where it simply disappears. After this, it no longer seems normal to invest in dry places just because they are familiar. And the more often you catch this moment, the faster you notice not loud promises, but quiet internal agreement. It is this that becomes the first sign that you stop living for a return into nowhere. The most important thing about this topic is not to become tougher or learn to cut everything off. It is important to stop confusing noise with direction. What calls out loudly does not always lead you to where it will be easier to breathe. Meanwhile, what requires almost no effort and does not make you contract often turns out to be much more precise. That is why it is worth listening to the inner response more attentively than to someone else's persuasiveness. Another thought that is useful to take with you is simple and uncomfortable at the same time. If a place, person, or thing constantly takes more than it gives back, it is no longer a temporary difficulty, but a signal. Not necessarily dramatic, not necessarily instant, but honest enough that it cannot be ignored infinitely. You are not obligated to stay where you are always having to persuade yourself to endure your own life. And perhaps the main point here is that the right choice initially feels not like a triumph, but like a reduction of internal resistance. It is not always beautiful on the outside, but very recognizable from the inside. When in the morning you don't want to gather yourself piece by piece before the day begins, when your head does not argue with your body, when only those connections and matters remain where you do not need to disappear, life becomes simpler without losing depth. Tomorrow morning should start exactly with this, not with the struggle for a vacant place, but with checking where you are already being reciprocated. If this video was helpful, subscribe so you don't miss the next day.